Good afternoon, and we're going to start this presentation by asking who's likely to provide us with the best possible advice. And we'd like to give you a few choices. We have what looks to be a very wise person in a library, which in some cultures is a symbol of wisdom. In some cultures, too, we have an owl. He is considered to be an animal who looks wise and is very astute. So why not look for an advice from him? Definitely not these guys, at least in our culture. They don't seem to be very smart, even though they are. People tell me they're very smart animals. In Spanish, as you know, burro is a synonym of dumb. So anyway, definitely not our friend, this hen here. Perhaps the wolf, and I was talking to Bob, my colleague, who's also given this presentation, and talking about the differences. In some cultures, the wolf is considered to be a menace, an animal to be feared. But Bob, you know something else about certain cultures, right?
Well, Plains Indians in North America tend to look at the wolf as kind of a spirit animal that brings wisdom and caution and all that to people who are staring at the wolf.
We want to seek their advice for sure, right? So
yes.
well, thank you. And yeah, this is Ponencia PUE001, Academia Journals Puebla 2022, the use of the Ombuds in engineering senior design projects. What about all that, about giving advice and all that? Well, we'll talk about that in just a minute. Here's who we are. All right, Bob, tell us who you are.
I'm what's left of Bob O'Connor. I have taught at St. Mary's for a number of years, and I'm currently the Ombuds for the university.
And we'll certainly define that word in just a minute, Ombuds. And I'm Rafael Moras. I've also been at St. Mary's for more than a few minutes, and I teach industrial engineering. Delighted to be here representing St. Mary's in this Congreso. Yes, we represent St. Mary's University, beautiful St. Mary's in San Antonio, Texas. And we're here to explain how the Ombuds has been very helpful in the senior design process in engineering. And we consider the Ombuds to be a conflict resolution resource. We're going to tell you why we think so. Bob, what do we mean by the Ombuds represented here by this lady in orange is an independent member of the organization?
Well, the reason, Rafa, is that I, as Ombuds, don't report to anybody but the president of the university. I'm not associated with any other unit in the university, so I'm what we would say totally independent of all other units.
Another thing that the Ombuds position implies is that everything is confidential. Please tell us what that means.
Anybody who comes to visit the Ombuds, and it's always an optional visit, can count on the fact that our conversation will remain confidential unless that visitor releases me from confidentiality for some reason.
And you're saying
the only other time I would breach confidentiality is if I detect that there is imminent risk of serious harm to self or others.
Thanks. And you say this is optional, so my boss cannot tell me to go see the Ombuds.
No, he can't tell you to go see the Ombuds under any kind of pain of not seeing him, but he can refer you to the knowledge that an Ombuds exists and is a good resource to use if you care to.
Leave it optional for me to go. Thank you.
Exactly.
The Ombuds is also neutral. What does that mean?
It means that I don't take sides. I'm impartial, so that when a person comes to me with a conflict between himself or herself and their supervisor, my inclination is not to take sides with one or the other, but try to reduce the conflict temperature so that everybody wins.
Okay, that makes sense.
As long as everybody is winning, that maintains fairness.
Okay. And of course, the ombuds represented here, also in orange, is supposed to be an informal resource. So what does that mean?
It means that if you come and visit the ombuds, you haven't really started anything. You haven't given notice to the organization that you're going to sue or you're going to file a grievance or something like that. And if there is a grievance filed, the ombuds does not participate in a formal process.
Once I start a grievance, somebody's going to have to do paperwork and follow up and investigate in a formal matter, not when they come to you.
No, that I would not participate in that part of any process.
Okay.
Now, a person in a grievance might want to come to me for advice vis-a-vis the grievance, but I would not participate. I would not take notes. I would not file any report.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for the clarification. This is what you are not, you or any other ombuds. By the way, the ombuds position, something funny happens when you tell our people in industry that you are the ombuds, right?
Yes.
What's their reaction?
A blank stare normally, because few people know what an ombuds is unless they have had experiences with them. And then they know what an ombuds is.
And and sometimes what you have to tell them after you start talking is that you're not a judge, right? So you don't have
Right.
any. What does that mean?
Well, I have no juridical power over anything. I
Okay.
can't make a decision that is enforceable in any way.
Okay. You're not a referee with a whistle either, right? You're not an arbitrator.
That's correct, because arbitration is a formal process, and I
Okay.
would not participate in a formal process.
And you don't always, well, you can't rule on who's right and who's not, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, very good. And you really explain this, an advocate for justice for all.
Normally, in a conflict, there is some kind of either misunderstanding or mistreatment somewhere along the line. My role is to help reduce all of that concern about treatment to where everybody is treated fairly.
Okay, thank you. And I accidentally hit the next screen, but well, tell us what this is, Bob.
Well, an ombud's role can be found, as you can see, in churches. It can be found on the upper right in schools. On the lower left, it can be found in governments. Let me go back to governments in a second. And in the middle bottom, it can be found in industry and corporate world. And on the lower right, it can be found in hospitals. In governments, on the lower left, it can be found, but it's a different kind of ombuds function in governments normally. Many national level governments have a national ombuds. A state might have a state ombuds, but they are what we call classical ombuds, and they have investigatory power, and they do have some juridical power. I am what you call an organizational ombuds, and we do not have anything but informal investigatory power, and we don't have any juridical power. We can't make decisions that bind other people.
Okay, all right. And perhaps before we go over the senior project interactions you've had, you can tell us how long you've been at St. Mary's, 2013, right?
Since mid-January of 2013, I was appointed the ombuds. Yeah,
And you just told us how it works, right? You report to only one person.
correct.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk about some examples of what you've done for the university before we go into the senior project. Here's an example. You get someone at your door who says, "Okay, tell us what happened there." True story, by the way.
This is a true story. Somebody came into the office very distraught. By the time he sat down in the chair and was talking with me, he was crying. He had been here for 15, 16 years, and his wife had just decided to file for divorce, and he was all upset with that. He was distraught, as you might understand that he would be. And his complaint originally was that she was in the wrong, and his complaint gradually came to be seen a little differently as we talked. We talked for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and it came to be revealed that when he was a kid, he had been rejected pretty strongly by his parents, and he had never even dealt with it. He tended to, as a result, he tended to wall himself off from other people, which protected him from being rejected. And his treatment of his wife had never been really good, he admitted. His treatment of his kids had been far from perfect, he admitted. After a while, after we started talking, I offered some ideas about what might happen if he changed. He began to accept the notion that he could change. He began to do a journal and record events that happened to him at home and how his feelings affected those events and affected him. He then began to be a little bit more intentional and a little less reactive to the kids and to his wife.
Mm-hmm.
That structure still remains. They're still in the midst of divorce, but progress is being made quite clearly. The loss of focus that he had found at work, he couldn't really pay attention to work, but that loss of focus has been replaced, I've seen him many times since, by a focused attention at work.
Mm-hmm.
The depression that he had at first when he walked in fact, he said, "I don't ever want to wake up in the morning anymore." That depression has been replaced by kind of a growing confidence in the future.
Okay.
He has developed a deepening realization that the problem took a long time to develop, and therefore he shouldn't expect quick fix kind of results. What could have happened is he could have been terminated for poor performance if nothing had intervened. It's shifted into better performance.
Mm-hmm.
It's benefiting the employee, it's benefiting the company, it's benefiting his colleagues, and it's benefiting all those downstream from his work who benefit from work done well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's been a valuable thing for him.
For sure, yeah. Here's the St. Mary's, beautiful drawing of the St. Mary's campus. And here's the ombuds looking for somebody who needs a little help, right? And this is what you find. Looks like there is trouble. And trouble is happening almost in every corner of our beautiful campus. So what does this empower you to do?
Well, this is, again, a true story. This happened a number of years ago. I received a number of visitors, it must have been 5, 6, 7 visitors, who were complaining about the same kind of thing, but they were from different units in the university. They were from one side of the university to another side, academics, non-academics, etc. And they were complaining about performance evaluations that they perceived to be unfair. It looked to me like there was a systemic problem with the way evaluators, again, from different areas in the university, were making their evaluations. And so I went to the president and I said, I think we've got a problem here. And what we wound up doing was changing and improving the training of those who became evaluators, supervisors generally. And since that has happened, that kind of complaint has reduced immeasurably. I get very few of those kind of complaints anymore.
Mm-hmm. So you identify a systemic issue that very few people on campus could have seen, right? Basically, because we all look internally as opposed to looking at the whole thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you. Here's another problem. Somebody's knocking at your door with this message.
Yes. Everybody is familiar with the problem of bullying. Everybody is familiar with the problem of micromanaging.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a good example of the problem surfacing from the visitor immediately. The boss bullies me. And that's a conclusion. That's a conclusion that I had to come to, not because the employee told me, but because when I asked, what do you mean the boss bullies you? That employee was able to start saying, well, he does this and he does that and he does the other thing. So those individual interactions, when taken together, clearly to me indicated that it was bullying. In this case, this was bullying from the beginning. That's not the norm. This was a person who was bullied in a public meeting into being forced to take a job associated with his work that he wasn't fit for, he wasn't equipped for, and it would have created enormous stress on him because of a medical problem that he has that shouldn't be public.
Mm-hmm.
And so he didn't say anything in the meeting. He just accepted what was said. Eventually, when he came to me, I determined that that person who tried to bully him didn't have the wherewithal, didn't have the authority actually to enforce what he was saying the employee had to do. When I convinced the employee that this was true, he refused to take that job and was not punished for it. And later, the situation was resolved through a little bit more creative approach to job assignation. And it was partly because of my suggestion about how to create a different option.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks for sharing that. And I think we need to quickly go over the senior design project and how you have made a difference over the years. This is a 2-semester project. It starts in the fall semester, finishes in May of the spring semester. We ask the students to intern at local companies, and they have to work as members of a team. As you can imagine, sometimes that results in problems when kids can't work with each other. I was sitting in my office, and one of the things they have to do, the students have to do, is give a presentation at the end of the year in May before a crowd of maybe 200 people, and it's also broadcast online to the world. And they know that it's a lot of pressure, and it is a non-negotiable requirement. One of these students tells me I can't present, and we've been working the entire year on presentations, and she says I can't present, and she freezes and she cries. I figure it was time to call Bob the Ombuds. Dr. Bob, tell us what you did in response. True story.
She came and visited me several times. She was crying. She indicated there had been some problems in her home, back in her home country, that made her incapable of presenting in a formal way to a large, unfamiliar population. We spent time talking about why she couldn't present. We spent a lot of time talking about how she could learn to present. Eventually, we scheduled a number of intense rehearsals here in the office and also with Dr. Moras in the classroom. Eventually, the stress tended to reduce itself and her self-esteem tended to increase. Her final presentation, I'll let Dr. Moras say something about her final presentation.
Yeah, just imagine that she is one of those in the cartoon, and she seemed confident. She was extremely nervous, but her presentation was very successful, very successful. And yes, she graduated with the rest of the team. And that was a great success story. And believe me, after many years of doing this, 2 or 3 days before the final presentations, I wasn't sure she was going to finish. But she did. She did. And she passed the class, and she's now a productive engineer someplace. We can't divulge any names, but yes, she is. Very proud of that. Thank you for sharing, Bob. Here's another problem we had. This is a team of 3. One of the team members can't work anymore, and she's crying, and she tells me the other 2 are always late. I have to do everything. It's not fair. It is not fair. And let me show you. This is what's happening. Talk to the other 2, and one of them tells me, well, she is unreasonable. I'm willing to work, he says, but she is clearly unreasonable. She wants things today when they're not due until 3 weeks from now. It got worse. They kept complaining and about the project and about each other. It was not a sustainable situation. So I again invited Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob, what happened?
Well, we realized that the group simply was not going to function continuing as that group. So we wound up splitting the group, which is why you can see the distance between the two, the two factions. Eventually, because of the split, now they were already stressed, but because of the stress, because of the separation, they got even more stressed and differently. They were stressed individually more than just as a group. The new stress required a lot of visits to the ombuds to help empower the individuals to refocus their efforts on the project using themselves rather than depending upon team members. Of the resultant projects, now you can talk again about the resultant projects, Rafa.
Yes, thank you. We ended up, we thought we were going to do 3 separate projects. We ended up with 1 and 2. They all graduated. They did very well. And those tears are tears of joy at the end. I don't think they'll remember the stress anymore because the end result was good, very good. I have to say that I was very doubtful about the end outcome of this experience, but I'm happy to report it was a total success. The last problem we would like to talk about is the what we affectionately call the un-team. This was a team who could not work together. Things were so bad that one of the team members complained that another one had tried to blind him by pointing a laser beam to his eyes. And he said to us, I can't see and I can't work and I hate this guy and I hate the team. Please, Dr. Bob, come and help. Help
Well,
me with the on team.
the team wasn't functioning. It was also an international team,
Yes, it was.
and their internationality didn't help them, at least at the beginning. I wound up scheduling a number of meetings weekly for a long part of the semester, 7 or 8 weeks, and then bi-weekly for a couple of months. We developed conversational stuff more than content stuff about engineering. And eventually, cultural differences. That's strange. What do you mean? Why do you do that? Were converted into, wow, that's really interesting what you guys do over there. The coaching and the mentoring helped reduce the height of the wall between all of them. Eventually, they became very good friends and good co-workers. Unfortunately, as you saw the animation, one of the members of the 4 just ghosted. He left, went home to his own country. He simply couldn't do it. There were personal problems that he had that were just unresolvable. At the conclusion, Rafa?
At the conclusion, the 3 remaining team members delivered their presentation at St. Mary's and also at the sponsoring organization before we put 4 cartoons here. I think that's accurate. I think we had 4 or 5 people from the
Yeah,
organization.
oh yeah.
The executive leadership, the leadership was there, and they did a marvelous job, an incredible job. It was so good that one of the sponsors, one of the leaders said, "This is the best team I've ever seen." And eventually we told the sponsors, well, if you only knew, that wasn't the case all the time. They thought we were just kidding around because the team was so impressive. They were so impressive that they graduated with flying colors and they became good friends. The former on team became excellent friends. After that, we've talked to some of them, and I know they keep in touch. They're in 3 different countries today, but they keep in touch. They keep in touch.
Might even say the UN team became the A team.
The A team, yeah, the former UN team is the A team. Anyway, who benefits from the interaction of the Ombuds, who's not even an engineering professor? Okay, who benefits? He's a former theology professor. Who benefits from his interaction? Definitely the students. You've seen a few who graduated because he was there to help out, to lend a hand. Definitely the faculty. I find myself bouncing off ideas of the Ombuds. He knows the projects. He goes, talks to the sponsors with us. So he's intimately familiar with the projects and the personal issues in them. Definitely the sponsors. They think we have the A team when maybe they would never know that this was the UN team. Society. We have a few more very productive engineers out there that perhaps wouldn't be there if it wasn't for this very successful experiment. And definitely the department and the university. We have a much better senior project. Accreditation loves it. They just love it. They love this experiment. And with this, we thank you for your attention, and we're here in case you need to contact us through the Congreso. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you, Bob. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you very much, Rafa.